Now, since 9/11, it has been startling the degree to which people who should know better have gone along with this propaganda, swallowed the war on terror whole, and cheered on aggression abroad while losing sight of the struggle for freedom at home. On the left, we've had people like Alan Dershowitz who defend torture, but many so-called libertarians have been even worse than a lot of leftists on civil liberties. Right after 9/11, there was some talk on the left and among libertarians, I remember, about how now the U.S. government could stop the drug war because there's the terrorists to fight. Well, the opposite's happened, of course. First the government tied the two issues together with that ridiculous ad campaign. Anyone who smokes marijuana is funding Al-Qaeda. Then the drug war accelerated, and the government began justifying every possible violation of our liberties now to fight terrorism. And they had this new great argument. They'd say, well, the U.S. has been doing this to combat drugs. Terrorism's worse than drugs. Yeah, the U.S. shouldn't have been doing it to fight drugs either. Now, the real question is why, seeing how purely evil the government can be, the largest per capita prison population in the world, or in the industrial world at a minimum, a Bill of Rights destroyed for asset forfeiture and snooping. Why would anyone trust this entity with more power to wage a war on terrorism? Terrorism's a tactic, it's not an enemy, it's a tactic, and a war against it is going to be at least as doomed as a war on drugs. The U.S. government has hundreds of thousands of peaceful people in just its domestic prisons. And people think it's going to protect our rights if only we give it more of our liberty. This should be absurd on its face as far as this relates to foreign policy. The same government that wages chemical warfare on plant life in Colombia, strong-arms Mexico to maintain a U.S. drug war internationally, is probably not going to be very humanitarian in the war on terror, right? And libertarians in particular should always be skeptical of the idea of our government going abroad to advance liberty. Freedom is not a government program. War is. Freedom's not. If central planning can't give us food and shelter, as the Soviet Union showed us, how could it guarantee liberty itself? If we can't trust it to allocate resources efficiently, how can we trust it with this calculus of trading freedom and lives, of both us and foreigners? It makes no sense. And yet some of these so-called libertarians continue to trust big government with the promotion of its opposite, liberty. If libertarians needed anything more concrete to understand our government is not entirely the best method of promoting liberty abroad, all while protecting our freedom, we should look at what it's done since 9/11. Our civil liberties have been battered without relent. The change in partisan loyalties to the state on civil liberties since the 90s has also been interesting, It was right-wingers who were said to be encouraging terrorism after the Oklahoma City bombing. It was the Democrats who were imposing new violations of privacy and passed the effective Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. And John Ashcroft decried Clinton for his calling upon Big Brother to read our email. Nowadays, the right is doing all they can to feed Big Brother steroids, And of course, elements on the left, there were good elements of the left even under Clinton. The ACLU challenged some of Clinton's power grabs. And today, there are people on the right who have been good too. But by and large, the right has never been good on civil liberties. I mean, if they were, they'd understand this drug war they've always liked is just unmanageable. They've also kind of seen the Bill of Rights as a protection of the guilty. It's been their, that's the big problem with our country, is the guilty, is the Bill of Rights is too strong. And when the Patriot Act was rammed through, we got this really bizarre defense of it. It was absolutely necessary, and yet it didn't give Bush any powers he didn't already have, right? We got the same runaround on Bush's extrajudicial wiretaps. Bush had claimed in April 2004 that all his wiretaps were all judicially approved, but this was a lie. He had the NSA wiretapping Americans without FISA warrants, which themselves have been notoriously easy for the administration to get even retroactively.